conflict has been going on, I'm told, since 1948. However, in recent weeks, we've seen a surge of violence between the two nations. Join us for this discussion, past president of the Jewish community, Mr. Ainsley Henriquez, and businessman and Palestinian, Maji Isid. Good morning to you both. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. Morning, Mr. Henriquez. Morning, Mr. Isid.
Morning.
Good morning again.
Mr. Henriquez, I read that you said you don't want to cast any blame, but can you just tell us what is happening and why is it happening, sir?
You know, it's one of these very unfortunate situations, and it really should never get to this level. We have seen too many of these situations that have developed over the many ages. We have leaders that create issues that encourage young people in particular to get involved with things which have no future. We saw it with the brown shirts in Germany. We've seen it with all sorts of other things. We've even seen it this year in the United States when they were encouraged to attack the Capitol. We have the situation now on the border from Gaza, which is not much different. They have been encouraged, and they've thrown, 3,500 rockets at Israel. Israel has retaliated. And unfortunately, what happens here is there's loss of life and loss of property and loss of a future for many people, at least in the short term. And it doesn't have to happen. People have to learn to be able to appreciate and talk to each other in a very real way, how we do in one of the most unique societies in the world, Jamaica.
So is this about land? Is it about religion? Is it about politics? Or is it about a little bit of everything? So let me ask you, for the folks who don't understand what the historical underpinnings or the catalyst for what's going on is now, can you give us like a Cliff Notes version?
Well, let me put it my way. I think that what we really are seeing, again, is the efforts of a major so-called regional power trying to create control of an entire region.
And who's the so-called regional power, Mr. Henriquez?
And the power is Iran.
Okay. I see. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Isid.
Yes, well, the core, if you want to understand any situation and you want to understand any problem, you have to come to the core.
Right.
What is the core of this problem? Why are the Palestinians throwing rockets or uprising? The core is occupation. Occupation started in 1947 through Israelis, through Israeli settlements. It came from Jewish people that came all the way from Europe. 400,000 settlers came. We welcomed them in open arms. 1947, with the help of the United States and help of some of the European nations, they grabbed themselves an army and took half of the country. 20 years later, 1967, they take the whole country. So what is the core of the core of the problem is occupation. So that's one point I want to put it. Now, after that, there's only been consistent illegal settlements. There's been passed 130 UN resolutions that Israel has never complied, maybe with perhaps not even 5%, except for the for the United Nations humanitarian effort. So that's the core of the problem. Annexation of Palestine, of the Palestinian land, illegal settlements, illegal Jewish settlements. That's the problem.
You agree with that, Mr. Henriquez?
You know, these are the results of what has happened to a certain extent, but the real story in Gaza is a very interesting story. Gaza has never had one simple total rulership by any state for many, 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 many generations, in fact, eons. Gaza was given back to the Gazan people in 19, whatever it was, by Sharon. And before that, it had been an Egyptian town. Before that, it had been, or after that, it became British. And it has gone through a number of different phases. The question really now still lies, is this really a Palestinian issue or an issue between Gaza and Hamas and Israel as a nation? And so, you know, it's very, very complicated, and you can bring all sorts of different experiences into finding a solution to the problem. Yes, there was an issue apparently in Jerusalem over some houses. That is a land issue. There is, as Maddie has said, there is an issue of occupation because it has not yet been clarified or agreed. Then they had other issues which were started, as we remember, when Arafat started the Infada. Oh God, my mind is not working clearly. So that there was a whole part of a program that does not speak to the decision between two nations. It speaks to really encouraging young people to take to the streets to cause damage, to cause hate, and in fact to cause murder.
So you don't think those young people are fighting for a cause? They feel inspired to fight for something that they're really vested in? You think they're just troublemakers?
Well, I think they're fighting with the same kind of cause that the leadership pushes on them, in the same way that young people, 2,000 or 3,000, tried to take over the American Capitol in Washington in this year. It's the same sort of base push. They don't create the idea. They create the response to the idea, to the encouragement of the idea.
Yep.
And so that's really what I think is happening and has happened throughout the ages.
Yep.
When we bring young people into the mix to be able to say, this is what you should be doing. Is there a result that comes out of it? No, there is no good result that has come out of any of it, ever.
Yep.
But the young people are the loudest voices now. I mean, even in the States that you draw the parallel to, it is because more young people are getting involved in the process why a lot of the change that you see is happening. So does the answer lie then in, or should I ask you where the answer lies? That's maybe what I need to ask you.
My argument is that the answer lies between adults having a sensible conversation and trying to come to a conclusion. And the answer simply is not easily come by, because the whole business of what is the result of the fact that a state of Israel was created? What is the answer to the fact that Israel was attacked and Israel has responded? Yeah. What is the answer to how Israel has responded? What is the answer to how people have created the Intifada and presently the argument about people killing each other on the streets of wherever it may be is really not a way that a sensible, mature set of people should be able to learn to live with each other.
Mr. Iseed, let me jump. I have to jump in, sir. Mr. Iseed, what would you like to see happen, sir?
What would I like to see?
I want to remind Mr. Enriquez on the location that this is a quarrel between some people controlling some young people's minds. I want to remind you that that's not such. And I want to remind you that the people in Gaza, 400,000 of those were refugees that were thrown out of their lands in Tel Aviv, in Ramat Gan, and all those other northern that you call the settlements, were thrown out, displaced, and besieged in Gaza City. Gaza City, it's only 139 square miles. It's been besieged.
Yes, it is. You're right.
Well, yes. And
there are 2.5 million people living in Gaza. So
go ahead, Mr. Iseed.
2.5 million people that have been displaced out of their homeland. I sent that picture. The green, as you see on your screen here, originally the Palestinians. And you come to 2016, those little green spots don't even represent perhaps 3% of the country. Along in those little green spots, for the only what's left for the Palestinian territories, even in there, they have more than 400,000 to 500,000 settlers, illegal settlements defined by the United Nations. There's not one United Nations resolution that Israel has come forth and set forth. They gave a two-state solution. Israel said yes, but unfortunately, the Americans, every time it came to implement, whether the Israelis didn't agree or the Americans vetoed it, we can never come to a conclusion. So don't come and say that we are getting depressed. We are the oppressors. The Israeli government is the oppressors. We are the people getting oppressed. We have the right to our homeland. We have a right to resist occupation. So the core of the problem is not controlling minds, and it's about justice. Where do you see justice, Mr. Henrique?
You have family there, Mr. Iseed? Do you have family now in Palestine?
Yes, I do. I have my kids.
You know,
how are they doing? 1 second, please, Mr. Enriquez. How are they doing now, Mr. Iseed?
Well, right now, we live in the West Bank. We don't live in the Gaza Strip. But I've been trying for almost a year to go home. And at the end, they shot me an email that I got denied. Even though I'm an American citizen, I have the right to entry to any country in the world. Now, let me remind you one more thing. Even in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, the West Bank was just in 2003 recently, they built the wall. They built the wall with maybe perhaps 3 entrances, denying the Palestinians their basic rights. You know, as a Palestinian, when I had to go to school there, I had to go to 3-4 checkpoints. For what? I was a 15-year-old kid. I had to go 3-4 checkpoints. I had to have my ID and go through the humiliation every day. Even till today, they still have their checkpoints, and it's always, well, there's, you know, it's the law. Well, where do we see justice here? So it's not about what Mr. Enrique suggests. Maybe he hasn't been back there to see what happens to our people and how humiliated they are. The last incident that happened in Jerusalem, yes, it's a whole neighborhood of Palestinians that have been living there for hundreds of years. And now, all of a sudden, you have Jewish settlers decide to come and take your home. How would you feel if you prayed to a church every day for the last 300-400 years and somebody tries to turn it into a church or a mosque? That's what's happening in Jerusalem. So let's get to the core of the issue, Mr. Enriquez, and let's stop beating the bush. And you know what I'm talking. We're talking about occupation.
I don't disagree that their argument for occupation. But what I also think you have to all remember is that there are 2 sides to every story. And the most interesting part of the story is that nobody has ever really brought out the amount of Jews, Arab Jews, Middle Eastern Jews, that have had to flee the Arab countries and have ended up in Israel. There are over 1 million of them. 1 million of them. And today, the majority of the people in Israel as Jews are in fact of Arab descent. So it's a very interesting situation when we talk about Palestinians, when we talk about Jews, when we talk about Muslims. We're talking about all sorts of different issues. Okay, yes, the European Jews, having only had 6 million of them murdered by Hitler in my lifetime, found the opportunity to create back for themselves a part of what was Palestine as a Jewish state. That's part of what happened. So you have to understand all of these issues. It's not just simple issues. It's the same story that if we left Jamaica today, where would we take back? Which part of Africa would we recapture? And if we had to, we would.
You said you wanted to you created a state of Israel. You created on the expense of Palestinian blood. That's what the Jewish people did. That's what the Zionism did. We have no problems with Judaism. The problem is Zionism. There's a difference between Judaism and Zionism. Jews have been living in Palestine. Maybe they were 1% of the population back in the 30s, early 1900s. In fact, it was the Muslims who always harbored the Jewish people. We have no problem with the Jewish faith. There was Jews living on thousands of years in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and they always had their rights. The problem is Zionism, and that's the problem that's happening today in Palestine, where you guys are trying to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. And we are the rightful owners of those land.
We have to go, unfortunately.
And we have the right to resist.
Unfortunately, we have to go, sirs. We thank you so very much for your comments this morning. We could go on. We could go on, but we have to go. Thank you, sir. Past President of the Jewish community, Mr. Ainsley Enriquez, and Palestinian living in the United States, Majid Iseed. Wow. We just pray that no one else will get hurt. They're killing kids and ladies and girls, so we hope that that will stop. Tough.